They probably lost track of time like I did this morning.
You good? Yes, sir. Good afternoon and welcome to today's Board of Commissioners work session, this May 26, 2026. Today we have two presentations before us. One will be with respect to the Economic Development Strategic Plan and the other with respect to facilities management. We will go ahead and get started with our first presentation. I'll turn things over to our Economic Development Director, Sabrina Wright, and she will help tee off our Economic Development Strategic Plan update.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman, Commissioners, and County Manager. Sabrina Wright, Economic Development Director. Today, we want to provide an update on the Economic Development Strategic Plan. We have KB Advisory here to share input as to the things that they have learned so far and some of the strategies as to how we proceed to move forward. This will be our last update prior to bringing this to you all for formal consideration for adoption.
Thank you.
KB team, Jeff Koski and his team.
Thank you, Sabrina. Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be with you again. Again, I'm Jeff Koski, President and owner of KB Advisory Group. As you know, we've been working with y'all and with the economic development staff and with the community on putting together the county's first economic development strategic plan. As you remember, we've been here a couple times to kind of give you an update along the way. We are getting near the end. And we want to share with you today some highlights of what we've learned, much of what we've talked about with you all, but just want to kind of continue to level set what we've learned, but then ultimately get to some of the goals and strategies that are embedded in the plan. Today is, as you know, it's a work session, so we want to get your feedback before we finalize the plan itself. We want to make sure that the goals and strategies are headed in the right direction. So that's really what this is all about today is to really kind of help you see where we're headed with this and give us any feedback before we finalize it and share with you the first full draft. So today, again, embedded in that is we're going to talk a little bit about what we learned. We're going to then talk about the strategy and then the next steps and, of course, give you an opportunity for question and answer. So first of all, I will say that we've had a tremendous experience working with you all, working with your staff, and working with the community. We feel like we have embedded ourselves in the discussion around economic development. We've talked to so many folks, including yourselves, and we've learned a lot, and we feel like this plan is really shaping up because of the great input that we've gotten along the way. So as you remember, we started this all the way back in August, really, and you know, we've been here. This is the third time we've been here, so we've kind of kept you up to date along the way. It's hard to see the star over on the right, but here we are, end of May, into June, where we're at project closeout. So again, the plan itself, and this is the current cover of the plan, is substantially written, I would say. We're about ready to finalize it, but again, before we finalize it, we think this is a great opportunity to let you weigh in, and so you can give us your input before you see the final full draft. Which, by the way, foreshadowing here, we expect to deliver the final or the first full draft to you on June 1st. So in about a week from now, less than a week from now. You'll have the full draft in your hands. And so you can see the sections over on the right. This is kind of the table of contents of what's in the plan. Again, kind of mirroring what we've talked about in terms of understanding existing conditions, what we learned, and then putting forth a strategy for the county. So I'm going to give you I've got two slides here to kind of give you an idea of what we've concluded. And then Gabby and Tate from our team are going to give you some more details. But again, in the what we learned, this is really the summation of the three key takeaways, if you want to think about it like that, the key insights. These are the things that we think are the most important things that we learned along the way. And again, we started with the fact that attraction to Cobb continues, right? Cobb is growing. Cobb has so much going for it. And we wanted to point that out right along the way. But as a good strategy, we also want to focus on things that we think can be improved upon, right? And so part of this is trying to understand what's good, but also what can the strategy address? Where are there ways to improve? And so you'll see these key insights are focused on things that may need continuing improvement or attention, from county staff, right? And so again, we're saying that attraction continues. Cobb is a desirable place to live, and particularly a desirable place to do business. So we found that, we heard that, we know that. However, we do think obstacles do exist, particularly as it refers to workforce readiness, and as the county continues to quote unquote get built out, product and land availability. We think that as you all sort of enter this next phase of growth for the county, sustainability of the county's desirability, we've got to sort of expand the idea of where we can build and what we can build. And that's what product and land availability means. So we'll get into more of this. Housing is the next bullet point here. Housing has, maybe not so surprisingly, but we weren't necessarily planning on having as deep conversations about housing as part of this economic development strategic plan. However, the plan led us there. The data led us there, and particularly the conversations with the stakeholders, with the community, led us to a conversation around housing. And this is an idea that the housing and economic development are intertwined. And I think the community has recognized that without a broader spectrum of housing opportunity, there's a potential to hamper the workforce. And so we heard a lot about how housing and economic development play together, and we have some data that kind of talks to what the community is feeling. And so again, this is not a housing study, and we're not trying to solve housing with this study, but we are trying to point out that housing and economic development are related, and that by working on housing, you're truly working on economic development. The third thing that we'll point out in terms of what we learned along the way, again, kind of goes back to that land availability piece, in that we think that we've found that what will drive the economy is not just greenfield development, not just commercial development on former pasture land, but that redevelopment is going to be the key driving Cobb County's future economy. That to find land for the economy to grow in a way that y'all want it to grow, you're going to have to focus more on redevelopment of existing developed land throughout unincorporated parts of the county. And that may be one of the most key thing that we learned along the way. So we will come back, and Gabby will talk a little bit more about those. Certainly we can answer questions about those. But those three key takeaways, those big key takeaways, lead us to these goals, right? And so these are the big goals in which all the strategies in the plan will flow, right? And so number one is we're going to talk about implementing county initiatives that advance economic competitiveness and align with coordinated regional economic development efforts. What does that mean? That means that there is a strong economic development ecosystem already in the county, right? You have actors in the county that are doing a great job, best in class. And let's talk about it. Select Cobb and the Cobb Chamber of Commerce and the Cobb Development Authority are three fantastic organizations. And the idea here is we want this plan to just ensure that the county's economic development efforts here at 100 Cherokee, these efforts that are going in here align with all of the other already strong actors, right? So we've got 4 strong actors at the table moving forward. That's part of what this plan wants to do, is just to make sure that the county is aligned with the already strong actions that are going on. There is good alignment already. This document is intended to codify that, if you will, to put it in writing that the county's economic development efforts want to be aligned with the other regional development efforts that are happening. Number 2, this is, again, this idea of redevelopment. So we think that the Cobb Economic Development Department is uniquely qualified and situated in a way to lead redevelopment efforts in Cobb County, particularly, obviously, the unincorporated parts of Cobb County. And so that's where there is expanded economic opportunity, is to focus on redevelopment, and the county has tools and can create tools to focus even more on redevelopment. So again, the larger economic development ecosystem exists. Right now, we see a gap in that system of who's focused on redevelopment, right? Who in Cobb County is focused on the redevelopment piece within the ecosystem? And we're saying that that should be the county's role in the ecosystem, is to align with the larger forces and specifically to lead redevelopment efforts. We think the county is again, as I said, uniquely qualified and situated to do that. So that's number 2, redevelopment. Number 3, again, is this idea of supporting the business of workforce and quality of life assets. This one, I mean, frankly, can get a little bit more fuzzy, right? If you think about, well, what do you mean quality of life assets? Let's just think about trails, for example. That trails, I would say, is a quality of life asset. It's not in so much that the Economic Development Department is going to be in charge of putting in trails in the county. But what we're asking of this plan is to acknowledge that things like trails help economic development. They help quality of life, and when you enhance your quality of life, you're able to grow and attract businesses as well as residents here. And so this third piece is really kind of intended to acknowledge that there are partnerships within the county in which economic development can and does already participate. Particularly as it relates to supporting local businesses, supporting the workforce, and supporting the quality of life assets. So that's really kind of the big ideas. That's in a nutshell. If the power went off right now, then you would have heard kind of the big ideas of what we wanted to bring to you today. Again, these 3 goals are really what is driving the plan and all the specific implementation efforts. But these 3 goals are what we want to make sure you all feel comfortable with. So hopefully the lights don't go out. Hopefully we'll get a chance to dig in here a little bit with you around these findings that we've had. So we do want your feedback, particularly on these goals. But we also want to make sure that it's clear as to how we got to these goals, which is why we want to focus first on what we learned. So that's the big summary. I'm going to say let's keep rolling. Gabby, you want to come and talk a little bit more about what we learned. And again, we are absolutely here to answer your questions along the way, but I think the idea is we're going to get through kind of our full presentation, and then we'll dig in with a deep conversation with you all. So, Gabby.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Pleasure to be with you all again, right? So Jeff went over kind of the key insights, but we definitely want to dig into a little bit deeper of, where those came from, right, as mentioned. And so, right, the big part of the EDSP, right, is emphasizing that ecosystem that Jeff alluded to, right? There are so many partners. You have all of your cities, your CID, Select Cobb, the Chamber Development Authority, business associations, your higher educational institutions. And so as you can see, some of these, logos names on the slide in front of you are, all the different people that we were able to talk to as part of the input process of this plan. And their insight and their input is what kind of helped us develop the goals that we'll be talking about in more detail in a second. So the last time that we spoke with you, back in February, both the community and the business survey were still wrapping up. We were still having some of our key partner stakeholder conversations. So now that all of those have concluded, we kind of combine what we heard from these responses, this input, and then what we found with some of our data and further insights that we gathered, and that helped develop what we learned, which are the kinds of 5 broader categories. So the future growth is in redevelopment, as we've been stressing. There's infrastructure investments that will be needed in our concern. Housing again, and is very important, and the risks that not addressing that or thinking about it in a long-term way may risk economic competitiveness. Thinking about the importance of internal business support, and then needing to expand your development toolkit. And I'll go through all of these more specifically. So again, redevelopment, right? So your commercial corridors have been kind of the focus of where we've been having growth, your commercial activity. But at the same time, though, because of that, they're almost completely built out in a lot of ways. So it's thinking of that in combination with, the older inventory that you've been having with your development peaking, around in the 80s, thinking of how do we redevelop these spaces and making sure that they align with the business needs of today as well as tomorrow. And so we saw that through a lot of our data digging that kind of matched what we had been hearing in that regard. Thinking about infrastructure, so both in your community survey, we've heard a lot, and even at some of our open houses, that, traffic is a concern, that, infrastructure investments haven't been equal across the county. And so thinking of, people like being in Cobb County because of its proximity to Atlanta and to other parts of the region. But once you are in Cobb County, though, there's a lack of maybe cohesive connectivity to get to different parts, to getting to places of work. You have more people that, work in Cobb County than there are jobs, so people are having to commute out to go to other places, hence all the traffic that residents have to experience. So thinking of how, when we think about growth in the future, making sure that it's balanced, that it is smart and in the right areas, that we're also thinking about the infrastructure investments that will have to go hand in hand to accommodate that so that we don't exacerbate existing issues. Again, back to the housing, Cobb County has a very strong, highly educated workforce. KSU is a big partner at one of the largest public universities here in the state. And from the community responses that we got from the survey, a lot of people identified affordable housing as a significant obstacle. And that can mean many things, but even from our partner conversations, making sure that there is enough housing options for across the income spectrum for all the different preferences and needs that workers from low to high in terms of income are able to access. Because in the main way, if we think we want to have, again, KSU, as I was talking about, but also the other universities, right? We want those graduates to stay and work within Cobb County to help grow and make it better. And so making sure that, for example, that those cohorts, when they graduate, that they're able to afford to still live within the county. But some of our metrics found that, as we've seen elsewhere nationally and regionally, that the pace of housing prices has definitely outgrown the rise in wages, right? And so as of today, from some metrics, the median household income countywide would be insufficient to purchase the median priced home within the county currently. So again, keeping housing top of mind and making sure that stays in concert with how we think about economic development. And this one's about greater emphasis on internal business support. So what this is referring to is the fact that, what's eye-catching in the news and what we talk about for economic development is business attraction. What new business is coming here, what investment they're making, how many jobs they're bringing. But there's also two different sides of economic development. Once a business is here, they should continue to receive the same amount of attention and support, from the county, from the partners, because most jobs that can actually be created from existing businesses as they expand and that they grow. For example, something that we found from our data was that, your non-home-based businesses, for example, they average about 10 years residing in one location, right? And so they are your corporate citizens, and we want to make sure that as we develop the whole plan, that we're speaking to both pieces of economic development. And so the last one is speaking about economic development tools and making sure that you have this arsenal that's fit and ready to address all of these various needs and build off of the ones that you currently have, especially ones that can be focused on the unincorporated parts of Cobb County. So a lot of prior planning efforts, thinking about ARC with the Livable Centers initiative, has been focused in your cities, and so they have a lot of concerted efforts. And so the goal with this plan, of course, is to making one that can be centered on tools and needed areas for unincorporated Cobb County as well, because that is your main purview in that regard. So thinking of what redevelopment-specific tools, whether that be TADs, land banks, land trusts, other incentives. We heard a lot of interest from a lot of partners in making sure that Cobb County is at least exploring all the different ways that it can kind of help and improve redevelopment efforts, especially if it's going to be the lead. And so all of those things built together and what brought us to the three key insights that Jeff just presented to you all a little bit earlier. And those also fed into our economic development strategy and our goals that Tate is going to provide some more insight into.
Good afternoon. Good to see everybody again. Thank you, Gabby, for outlining kind of the background, the why of we've come to these goals. And so we're not including every single strategy underneath all of these goals. Each one has strategies and actions, so we'll stay fairly high level here. But I really want to think about the 1, 2, 3 as the idea that we're implementing the county initiatives in a way that's more of the soft infrastructure. So ensuring that the partnerships that exist are strengthened and streamlined, but also understanding that there's an opportunity for, future projects that may bring in other partners that aren't incorporated here yet. And it's also an opportunity for Economic Development Department to be the internal lead within the county between departments. You know, we've hit on already a couple of examples of how economic development hits many different parts of county's government. And so between Parks and Rec, between planning and zoning and permitting, those activities need to have a central liaison within economic development, and that's a really important piece in dealing with, you know, business attraction and retention. You want that customer service level, and so I think that's really the main focus of Goal 1, along with continuing to collaborate with those economic development partners and expand the workforce development and education partnerships. So this is people-focused. Really, it's on that web of that infrastructure, each one of these having specific action items associated with them. So once you've got this kind of soft social infrastructure in place, the real meat of this plan is on the redevelopment and reinvestment within Cobb's unincorporated commercial cores, with the understanding that continued relationships with your incorporated partners still exist. And so here we're really thinking about marketing and promoting redevelopment in those priority areas, but expanding the use of your development tools. So we've hit on a couple of those, from the incentives to the development authority to the partners, exploring leveraging additional redevelopment tools. So that's thinking about TADs, thinking about SSDs in a way that's more strategic and geographically focused to what your built environment is today. So this, there's a lot of background here. I think we've previously shared some of the data side, but I want to bring this back up to give you an understanding of how we identified the first of Cobb's redevelopment areas. And so really this framework being the first economic development strategic plan, think of this as setting up an entire framework for the future of redevelopment efforts throughout the county. And so looking at the existing property by class, we've identified where the most need is for redevelopment. So what's going to help from an incentive standpoint to push a redevelopment over a certain threshold? Where's the support for that? And we've broken up Cobb into these 5 sub-areas, and then understanding the unincorporated areas, where are the redevelopment areas for the next 5 years to be prioritized. And so the first one here is this KSU and Town Center redevelopment area. This reaches a bit north of Town Center or KSU here to capture some of those commercial cores that are aging and at risk of obsolescence. The second one here, which is previously been identified, is the Canton Road redevelopment area. Understanding some of the key properties, those that are listed there are the largest in square footage. So where is the biggest opportunity from a redevelopment standpoint? And finally, the Austell Road redevelopment area. So these are areas to be considered for additional tools, whether that be another value capture tool that exists in TADs or in SSDs or otherwise, enterprise zones. All of that is really laid out within the expanded version of the plan that you'll see next week. And finally, Goal 3 is to continue to support the business, workforce, and quality of life assets. Attraction is one piece of it, but retention is as vitally important. So making sure that there are programs to support businesses that are not even yet created, all the way up to those that are, large employers and are looking at expansion opportunities, hitting the wide breadth of opportunities there. The second one here within this goal is thinking about establishing this entrepreneurship and innovation hub. We've seen these models play out throughout the region and other municipalities and nationwide of partnering with those education institutions to be a bridge between public-private. Thinking about workforce pipeline, opportunities, and access to capital are all part of those strategies. And then finally, assisting with updating and promoting assets and policies. This is looking at kind of this 5-year plan of how are the target industries that we've identified, I'm about to talk about, how are those incentives aligned with what it is that you want to attract and retain moving forward. So the goal 3 is really tied to the specific NAICS codes of each of these industries. And so we have identified kind of 4 subgroups of target industries. This is a combination of a more technical analysis as well as conversations with the business community that are here today and what they see for the future. These first 2 are already really strong growth potential and innovation opportunities that you have. Healthcare and medical support is, there's a struggle here for workforce retention and for expansion of that workforce. And so having a focus here is important in thinking about incentives that are going to support the industry. Advanced manufacturing, you've got really critical key employers within this, and having incentives that are supporting those folks is as equally important as attracting something that you don't have yet here. And, you know, the advancement of this industry, I think it's important to pay close attention to what will happen in the next 5 years within advanced manufacturing. And so having a really targeted highlight on that was important. The next 2 are tourism and recreation, as well as technology and innovation. And so tourism and recreation, it's important to understand, this is where the quality of life asset comes into this. You've had tons of success with the Battery and other recreational amenities and entertainment amenities. Those go hand in hand with making sure that you're keeping the workforce and those employers really attracted to Cobb. And so having that understanding of how much tourism plays into your local economy, it's important to mirror those efforts from economic development point of view. And finally, the technology and innovation. This includes everything from research and design, telecommunications, cybersecurity falls into this as well, and really the conversations with KSU in expanding their research footprint really led to this becoming its own category for a target industry, so that they can, that can be properly leveraged in thinking about graduates that are coming out of this county, finding jobs to stay within this, and the high-paying jobs that are really focused on solving the many future problems that these great grads are coming out in these industries. And so that's just linking and leveraging that opportunity to your higher education. I know I talked through that fairly fast, and we got under our 30 minutes, but next steps, like I said, we will have next Monday, June 1st, you will receive a full draft. This will have more of the data background. We haven't gotten into that in this one, but in previous studies, so you'll be able to see how all of that supports the recommendations that we've outlined. We ask that the 12th be the final day for feedback. We are open to having conversations as you review. We can set that up. And then hoping to come back July 14th for voting on adoption. So we've got enough time in June to really hear your feedback, and really critical today if you've got questions for us before we really finalize that full draft and put it for consideration to you all. So we can stop there and take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Appreciate the amount of time and effort that has been taken over the past several months to assess economic development in Cobb County and to help us determine how we move forward. I'm presuming that you've had opportunity to speak to all the commissioners, but I still will go down the dais and see if any of them have any comments or questions. And I'll start with you, Commissioner Gambrill.
I really don't have any questions. I just found it was interesting on your one slide with the targeted industries for tourism and recreation. You did not provide salaries like you did on the other 3.
Sure. So in the back of your packet, you'll find specific salary information. We can be sure to include that in the final plan. That's meant to just be a snippet, but good edit. We can include that as well.
Okay.
Certainly ranges far beyond some of the other industries. It's important to note.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Allen.
So I have a couple of questions. One, In the beginning, you talked about the partnerships between the other three entities in Cobb, Select Cobb, the Chamber, Development Authority, but there weren't any details in here. Are you guys going to outline specific ways that partnership can be formed, and so we're not blurring or crossing lines in what each organization does?
Certainly. I think a big distinction here is that this is the county's plan, right? And so what you'll find when you receive the full plan is the county's initiatives moving forward, but the recognition by action item who the identified partner is for that. And that's an exercise that we went through at the consensus workshop, was understanding where are the existing efforts, and if these are the future efforts, hey, partners, where are those opportunities to collaborate? Doing that early in the plan, so that will be spelled out. You'll see in a full matrix which partners are identified with which initiatives.
And it'll be up to us to calibrate that relationship, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I mean, I think it's a key question, and there's been a lot of conversation around this very point. I mean, I'll just, be honest that there's been discussions. We do economic development well in Cobb County. Yes, we agree. And this plan is intended to help push it forward so that the county can have its seat at the table in the discussions, and the county is able to use its tools that are not afforded to anyone else, right? And so the calibration piece, I wouldn't say so much that we're asking anyone to recalibrate. I mean, I think it's important to note that this plan will not ask anyone to necessarily recalibrate what they've been doing. It's more of, let's see how the county, this plan is an exercise in inserting the county's redevelopment powers into the economic development ecosystem in the county.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And then secondly, on kind of in the same vein, is this going to also discuss the relationships between the county and the cities? Because a significant amount of economic development activity happens in the 7 cities, not just the county. So it's just,
Yeah.
it's a lot of bifurcation going
There's
on
a lot
with
of
this.
There's a lot of bifurcation, absolutely 100%. I mean, this plan recognizes that recognizes this bifurcation. It is intended to point in the direction of cooperation and partnerships. And that, I guess the key here is that we don't have a plan to a script for economic development to talk to every city. I mean, there are relationships that go deep and wide in lots of areas. So the big idea here is to acknowledge what you're saying, in that not only does the county have economic development tools, each city has their own economic development tools, and only when they're working in concert is the county's economic development efforts really going to be optimized, if you will. So that's really what we're trying to point out, is that we're not trying to prescribe for the cities what they should be doing as it relates to this plan. They all have their own plans and comp plans, et cetera, but this plan is specifically for the county and acknowledges that you have lots of other good partnerships to lean on.
And I guess what I'm looking for more is guidance on how, as a county, we can bring those others to the table. Do we need to form some type of working group,
Yes.
Because there's a lot of, okay, and that's what I'm getting at, is it contemplate?
Yes, there is
those-
outline programming with expectations of when the cadence of those meetings should happen and who's identified as the partners here. And I think a big thing that came out of this, just to touch on, is the idea of redevelopment being the big prize of this plan, and making sure that land use controls are within your grasp, because if you don't have permitting and land use controls in these unincorporated areas, it makes it difficult to understand how to put your redevelopment tools to work.
Okay.
But yes, coordination and what that looks like truly from a day-to-day is outlined in this.
Okay, perfect. And so moving on to another section, I'm sorry, I've got couple.
Please.
You were very diligent in calling out housing, but there was only one reference to transportation where you talked about majority of people still drive. Was that not contemplated as well, the challenges around transit infrastructure, transportation? Are we going to see more of that in the final report, or is it just not as focused?
Well, I would say you will absolutely see the recognition that there are challenges and that does potentially negatively impact, those challenges potentially negatively impact county's economic development efforts. So that being said, just like we can't solve housing, we can't necessarily solve transportation with this. I think the impetus coming out of this plan is to say that economic development should have a voice and a role in those discussions going forward. In that, the county's transportation plan is going to drive transportation policy, and housing policy, lives outside of economic development. But our big point is that it is absolutely key that there is cross-department cooperation, and that everyone sort of understands that that these things interact, and that for economic development to really be successful, that the economic development department needs to be part of conversations in transportation and in housing. So again, I think it's pointing in that direction of cooperation. We're going to get into some details about what we think would make economic development, shine a little better under housing and under transportation. But again, we're saying that those departments, the people whose job it is to think about those things, still do those things and accept input from economic development and really let economic development drive some of those discussions when appropriate.
Okay. I wouldn't want someone to read this and see that there's a focus on housing, but there's not an issue with transportation. So I just want to make sure we equally weight.
Duly noted, absolutely. And so that's fantastic feedback, and we will be weighing that as we finalize.
And then last, on the targeted industries, I noticed you had advanced manufacturing, and on the targeted industries, the whole section reads interesting because it's a targeted industry, but it's also an active industry. You list all the ways we're already in it, so it's not really, I'm not sure how to read that as a target when we've got all these assets that are doing it. But my question on the advanced manufacturing is two things. One is extremely land intensive, and you called out at the very beginning how we have a deficit in available land. And even if you were to redevelop some of the land that we have, issue number two is you would then be putting advanced manufacturing in residential or commercial pockets, which we have an issue with now as far as corporate pollutants, other things close to, gas stations close to schools. We've got a lot of moving pieces.
Sure.
So just wanted to understand, in the advanced manufacturing, are you saying focus on those that are already in place? Or is this truly a targeted industry where you're saying we should be going out and looking to bring other advanced manufacturing in? And then the second part of that question, you can do them all at once, is you mentioned that we all know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I don't. So if you can expand on what you're talking about is going to happen in advanced manufacturing.
Yeah. You don't have the crystal ball that tells you what's going to happen in the next 5 years?
Not in my left pocket.
I don't have it either. I'll be
sewed
honest.
up, so.
The idea here, though, is that in certainly a changing, we can certainly guarantee that this industry will see changes in the next 5 years. And the way that incentives work within Cobb County is they're attached to the NAICS codes. And so in the idea that you may lose or not be able to adapt to this industry, they should be identified as a target. So it's equally about retention as it is as traction. I know there's a couple parts in that. Did I?
No, that makes sense. And that's where I was confused on, is it the retention, because I would agree, everything you've listed on all of these in target industries are things that we want to retain. But I wasn't understanding the target part, if you're saying we should be.
It's tied to the incentives, okay. Yeah. It's got to be kind of strictly outlined. Otherwise, there has to be an associated target industry. If you're too broad, you're not creating any benefit to one industry over another.
Well, thank you for your work on this.
Well, thank you, and these are great questions, and I just want to kind of lean in on this just a little bit, just thinking ahead, right? Well, for y'all as the Board of Commissioners, well, how would we use this plan? You know, what does this mean for us? And this is one very specific way that we think this plan can be useful, in that as questions about incentives, questions about, you know, where do we put our staff resources, where do we put our, you know, our county treasurer, sometimes you want to put more of that into, you know, retaining and attracting certain industries. And so that's important that this plan spell out which industries are the priorities of the county, so that when questions come up down the road for this body, should we support this or not, it will be an easy answer. If it's one of your targeted industries that has already been approved as part of this plan, that makes the decision down the road, do we support this effort to attract or retain this type of industry? Well, you can refer back to this plan and say, well, it was a target industry, and therefore that sort of elevates it in the decision-making process. That's how it works often with these types of plans.
And it goes back to, I'm sorry, you started it.
Yeah,
So,
that's fine. We're here to talk.
But it goes back to kind of my first part of the question about the cooperation between other interested parties.
Right.
Because some have tools that are better for the retention piece, while some have tools that are better for attraction. And understanding what you have in your toolbox and how we work together to truly work on the economics of the county is going to be important, which is why I'm hoping that's outlined and expressed in the report, so we know how we work as much as what we do and when we work together.
Yeah. That's really good feedback. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Burrow?
Yeah, and to piggyback on that before I get into my questions, we're also going to be competing with the cities, not just partnering with them, but they're going to want some business too that we may be trying to attract to come to unincorporated. So, and they have their own economic development strategies and personnel as well. Going to the 3 areas for redevelopment, KSU Town Center, Canton Road, and Austell Road. I guess in 2013, Sabrina, we did an assessment throughout the county and found 38 sites throughout the county that were listed for redevelopment. So I guess our staff will be updating that list for the future, but Canton Road I had 13 on Canton Road. And it's still in my district. So we had gotten down to all but 2 of those 13 being redeveloped by 2019. And now I don't know where it is after COVID and the economy like it is. But I'd like to see a revised redevelopment list and to start with the committee that I formed back then to get these on Canton Road redeveloped and revitalized as well. And I don't know what we're doing as far as redevelopment for the other 2 areas there, you know, in other districts. But I know we have looked at that, and then there was also some incentives like enterprise zone that was identified. So I'd like to see a reclassification of all that, but I think that would be from our staff, not from your study, so.
That's right. Well, the language is set up within this plan to update a redevelopment list at a certain cadence, and also to revisit the enterprise zones. So that's something that is kind of that research is actively going on as this plan is going on, to understand there are certain areas that don't qualify anymore from when those were done, and how does this refresh? This helps to understand where we might have priority areas where there are eligible tracks for that incentive.
Okay. And then, you know, I'm glad to see the medical healthcare profession as a targeted industry too. And Canton Road is a great location for Kennestone and even north to Chastain and getting into the town center area. I see Tracy back there. So I think, you know, looking at that, and you don't get specific to small business, but would that be incorporated in this? To attract small business?
Oh, yes, yes. And you'll find in the full version of this plan that small business, and not even small business, it's businesses that are not yet created. The county has a really important opportunity to provide support for businesses that are looking to start.
Right.
And then how do you then support every stage of that? So that's really on kind of the goal 3 in thinking about that maintained support.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sheffield?
Thank you. I just had 2 questions, and one we discussed with respect to collaborating with the city, so I'm looking forward to seeing a little information about that. But going back to the obstacles regarding workforce readiness, transit was in the presentation, but what are some other obstacles that are not shared in your presentation that you would like to bring to our attention or we need to consider?
I think it starts with, you know, sort of this mismatch between where people live and where people work, and that, you know, that there are key industries in the county, and that there are, you know, the healthcare, for example, right, has some pieces of healthcare jobs. The healthcare economy are, you know, less lower income jobs, right? The support for the medical. And what we're finding is those folks are, you know, having to travel a long way to come here to be that, you know, essential worker as we come to know them. So that's one of the things, is just sort of this idea that it's hard to live here, particularly on those service worker salaries, and you know, same with the hospitality pieces. And so that's it is a transportation issue, but it truly is a workforce issue, in that if you have a hard time getting your workers to your place of business, it impacts the place of business.
Right.
So I would say that's probably the key piece of the workforce discussion, is really kind of focused on that spatial issue. You know, there is obviously a strong secondary education system in Cobb. So, you know, I don't think that we're saying that there is a lack of education. I think it's just a continuation of collaboration. lots of big words there, but continuation, the collaboration between the secondary education providers and really these target industries, and where the growth is. So again, just continuing to sort of take advantage of the partnerships that do exist, and continuing to find ways. You know, we mentioned the Hatch Bridge entrepreneur incubator at KSU, you know, that's really, you know, just coming into its own. And that would be an example of, you know, sort of the county getting involved in those discussions and making sure that Hatch Bridge certainly, you know, achieves the goals at which it wants to achieve, but at the same time is part and parcel to the conversation about developing the workforce in the county as well.
Okay. And with respect to the targeted industry, then, you know, along those lines, the thought is that if we target those industries, it would help bolster in that area for workforce readiness?
Yeah, again, I think that's the idea, is that we're saying, you know, there are other industries out there, of course. There are going to be opportunities that don't fall into these 4 buckets of target industries. So we don't want to exclude any opportunities. We're not saying that you shouldn't seek other opportunities.
Sure.
But we are saying that when opportunities come along to enhance these 4 industries, that's what we're recommending you do. And so, yeah, again, the partnerships, creating a workforce pipeline, particularly as it relates to these 4 industries, are all part of the idea of targeting them, working on them, attracting businesses, retaining businesses, and building a workforce to support those businesses.
Okay, thank you. And, you know, it's going to require a 3-prong approach, which you basically have outlined, and that's transit, housing, and workforce. You can't have one without having all 3, and I think that all 3 are going to be critical in moving us forward within the county. But with the housing choice, the way it reads, I'm a little kind of concerned with the way it reads. It almost reads that the historic patterns have become increasingly misaligned, but I think it's the other way around, really, and it's an issue, obviously, that we're not just dealing with in Cobb County, but within the metro area, within, all of the country. So how do we kind of align it? It's not just zoning, because that's what, when I read this, that's what I read, that it's really historically land use and zoning, but it's more of, it's that, but it's also the workforce. It's also transit, and it's also the other things that we discussed. So I would like to have more conversation around the housing piece as well.
Okay. No, that's good feedback. We want this to read clearly, and I think I'm picking up on your point of causation with that, yeah.
And something to consider just as going forward about this conversation around housing. We work across the state, and we see counties using their economic development tools in various ways. And sometimes they use their economic development tools as a focus on housing, so that there is even a greater impetus from economic development at the county level to using those tools to get housing that isn't being produced otherwise. I don't think we're going quite that far here necessarily. I don't think we're prescribing that you must use your economic development tools to get more housing. But you could think about ways to focus on redevelopment on in some of the corridors or some of the areas that we've mentioned as a way to attract additional development. Some of that development may want to include housing. And so that mostly the idea is that when you are looking to redevelop along a corridor, for example, and thinking about how do we get some of these aging and obsolescent strip malls, for example, into something else more economically viable and sustainable, the idea is that part of that redevelopment may include housing, right? And so the idea I think we want to insert in this plan is that housing is part and parcel to workforce development, but also part and parcel to redevelopment, and that a lot of the big visions for redevelopment may need to include housing. And when you do so, it's good for the economics of the deal, and it's also good for the other sort of reasons why additional housing can be helpful to economic development. So that's, again, I think the language around housing can be inserted in a few different places here to
Yes.
think about it as a priority in different ways.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay. A number of questions and some observations. Maybe I'll start at the key insight tab. And I believe a commissioner touched on this, but would love to have you expand more on workforce readiness and how that is an obstacle here in the county.
I think one thing that we didn't touch on yet is the idea of reskilling in programs that work with workforce. The recognition that as industries change, as certain industries who have not had the same, an example is a welder, right? We haven't produced as many welders in the workforce, generally speaking. And so the idea that those jobs go unfilled as people exit the workforce, there may be the reskilling opportunities. So I think that's certainly part of it, so that you can have workforce participation that's more sustainable in programs that are linked with Workforce Cobb, which does a great job.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunities to strengthen the target industries to what Workforce Cobb is already doing. And then kind of expand from a reskilling point of view.
Okay. Is that observation Cobb specific, or is it just generally, just industry, nationally specific? I'm just
I would
curious
say,
to know if there are indicators that we should be extremely mindful of or sensitive to that are in Cobb County.
right. Yeah, I would say that this issue exists across the country, certainly, that there are, call it, non-white collar positions that aren't necessarily getting filled, that every county in the country could focus more on, because it's such a great need across the country.
Okay.
But I think that one of the keys here is that we wanted to elevate this idea of workforce development as a key piece of all of this, is because, I think that we've spent a lot of time in redevelopment, we spend a lot of time in thinking about sort of, projects.
Yeah.
But that workforce is very important, and we wanted to make sure it was elevated to the
Absolutely.
top. And so I think that, again, as Tate says, as things evolve, we want to make sure that this plan is able to respond to the changing workforce needs.
Okay.
And so I don't think that there is a dire issue, right? I don't think that there is a major problem with workforce development in Cobb County that goes beyond what most counties would be experiencing. But we wanted to elevate it to say, nevertheless, it's worth keeping a close eye on, and because these things change quickly, and this plan needs to be able to focus on workforce housing in the same way that it does the other pieces.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that observation. I contrast that with the land product availability, which we know is COP specific.
Right.
But the other issue, and I'm not saying it isn't an issue, but we're very fortunate to have education be an economic driver here in the county with the strength of our K through 12 schools. I think we're very uniquely situated. We have 8 public and private universities and colleges here, which is something that I think other jurisdictions would be very envious.
Right.
Obviously
Yeah.
jealous.
And I appreciate this conversation. I'm going to challenge us to go back and make sure we're presenting this in the right way, and that it really is a strength. And again, as we've done our SWATs, certainly the education system is a strength of Cobb County, whether it's secondary, post-secondary, et cetera. So we want to acknowledge that, and so we want to make sure we get the language right. And also, speaking of that, in what I just said, I said workforce, and I added in housing, but I didn't mean to say housing, the elevating workforce as a topic here.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to have it just looking at things with rose-colored glasses.
Yeah.
That's why if there's something specific that we need to be mindful of, with all of that positive data, if there are any unique tools
Yeah.
that could help us, please do, because we can look at Cobb as a whole, but we know that there are issues of economic mobility for certain geographic areas and certain demographic populations, which may not be progressing as quickly as others. We have areas there, Cobb generally has low unemployment. We have census tracts that have traditionally had higher rates of unemployment. So I'm looking for help if we can address that kind of economic mobility by looking at workforce readiness. That would be helpful. There was one data point that I looked at in your slides that talked about turnover in the health industry. We know South Cobb is one of the highest industries where we have people working and that's performing well in South Cobb is the healthcare industries. So if there's this is just an example, if there's a mismatch, help us there. And then help us see where our opportunities are, because as much as there could be a mismatch, there's also a strength with having South Cobb High School with its magnet program. So I'm just looking at more specific data around workforce, because I see workforce and economic development really being one. Yep. And definitely looking at economic mobility being important. I agree with all of the conversations around housing choice, and I know community development somewhat distinct, but also goes hand in hand with housing choice. I don't know if you have examples of jurisdictions that are doing a good job of having people who may have moderate incomes be able to get to work in some of those moderate income fields. For instance, one of the target industries that you shared had to do with tourism and recreation. And those are not the most highest paying jobs that we need people to work there. Are there other jurisdictions that have been benchmarked that are doing a good job of getting people to work in those tourism areas? So that's just a question I have. Some examples of that would be great. I think of Disney or other areas that have tourism attractions, may have other stadiums. Are there options that we could be considering? And I guess that gets to my question. I saw the list of partners that are here with this, and I'm just curious to know, did we benchmark against any other Metro Atlanta regions? Or, excuse me, metropolitan Atlanta jurisdictions? Okay,
Yeah, at the county level.
at the county level?
Yes.
Did we look at any counties outside of the state, looking at comparable jurisdictions? Sometimes we've benchmarked ourselves against Mecklenburg, against Houston, Prince George County. Sometimes I've seen Nashville come up in comparisons of our jurisdiction. Just
We really focused on Georgia, specifically the Atlanta region. You know, we think some of the neighboring counties are interesting. Nobody has exactly, you know, the template that Cobb needs. And part of the reason we kept it local is because of the idea of economic development tools, in that it's interesting to benchmark, you know, from a data perspective, similar counties throughout the country, and it's useful in many regards. But particularly this benchmarking was really about, you know, what tools do counties have in Georgia? Because, you know, once you get outside of Georgia, the laws are different. And so in Georgia, what are counties doing with their economic development tools? And so that's really where the benchmarking has largely been, is, you know, how the different actors in economic development in each county come to play and use their tools to advance the county overall.
okay,
And how can Cobb stay competitive
okay.
in that arena, I think was really the focus of staying within Metro Atlanta.
Okay. I'll leave that at that. It's just hopeful to have other data. We're the third largest county. And so sometimes just comparing ourselves against others, there's just no comparison, which is why I find national partnerships, national training is helpful.
Okay,
There's just very few counties that have 800,000 people or more.
yeah. No, that's a fair comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in comparing ourselves against other national or regional partners, I'm very interested, and we've had long discussions around the partnership model that we have here. There's different variations of partnership models in the region, and I was hoping to see some comparison and some contrast to not just how Cobb is constructed, but how other jurisdictions are constructed here. So that's something that if it hasn't been done, I really would like to see.
You'll find that in the full plan.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great, and
The
then,
organizational structure of competitive economic development ecosystems is
Yes.
something that's drawn out there. It is important.
it is, and I know you said what we have here is working, and we value the partnerships that we have here, but this is our first economic development strategic plan, and I'm thinking that it's taking a step back and looking at things a little bit more holistically than just saying what you have works, continue, and saying these are what the options are and how are we moving, what's the desire of the board to move strategically. And I kind of feel like when I'm listening, I don't know if I'm getting some observations, and I don't know if I'm getting options that allow this board to make decisions about how this framework may move strategically.
Okay.
So any examples, options, benchmarks, that gives us the ability to have more influence in this is definitely valued. So even the questions around transportation, what are different transportation options that work, what are different housing options that work, so that we can perhaps we have something to lean from to make decisions about how we move strategically forward.
Okay.
I shared with you, and I'm going to share here, this was not a conversation I'd hoped to have in this setting, but I'm just surprised it just wasn't brought up at all. And we've had very robust discussion around this, so I'm a little disappointed about it. Commissioner Brohl and I were here when Select Cobb was being created, and I remember there being very robust conversation amongst commissioners, in fact, some consternation around it. Initially, we were not partners, and it took a while. I don't even know if the county even contributes to Select Cobb, as I think was requested. But the iterations of how economic development has evolved in the county hasn't necessarily been a straight line process. And even though Cobb County traditionally does very well when it comes to economic development, I was hoping, since this is the county's economic development plan, that this is a plan that's empowering our economic development to get its arms around this. While those other plans and things have moved forward, we were modifying the way we did economic development in the county. This position used to report to the county manager. It had its own agency, then it moved to finance, then it became its own. So we still are trying to formulate what this looks like for us. What I'm hearing you say, and which something that is perhaps is a bit of a bitter pill, is that our economic development role should only comprise of two activities. One is to be an internal liaison when it comes to economic development. That's already a given, that that our economic development department or director is an internal liaison. We would expect we wouldn't have to tell the Department of Transportation to be an internal liaison with transportation, or an IS department to be an internal liaison with IT. Those things are really a given. So the other area that I'm hearing come out of this, which would be the role of our economic development, has to do with redevelopment. Perhaps that's a unique space that we can play in, and that's something that I know that has helped with Canton Road. We looked in the South Cobb area for redevelopment. But we will be honest, I'm looking for more as we look to strengthen and provide soundness to what economic development is in Cobb County. I think the partnership that we've had with the Chamber, with Select Cobb, with the Development Authority, I think has worked very well in getting Cobb to be the way that it is. I shared in my State of the County that we have 7% of the state's population. We have, I think, contribute about 9% to the state's GDP. So we are doing very well when it comes to economic development contribution. But are there things that could be made better? Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's something that I want to share squarely here. So I have had concerns, and again, this is not the setting. I'm just disappointed to not hear you express any of the conversation we've had around this, so now I feel like I have to. But there are concerns to me when it comes to those four relationships and understanding who does what and who is responsible for what, who is accountable for what, who gets the benefit of what. Out of all the entities that you shared, the only entity that's accountable to the citizens of this county is the Economic Development Department here, because it serves under the elected body here. So there have been policy interests that have been here on the board that has not necessarily been promulgated by other entities, because they do not have to be responsive to these policy interests. So the only person that we can hold accountable to that from a board perspective is our Economic Development Director.
Yes.
And ensuring that the way that economic development occurs promulgates through the other agencies requires a more active, it requires a coordinated way of identifying how we all work together. There are different ways that this works across the region, and there are different ways that this works across other similar regions in the country. Help us to have a stronger model so that our policy interests as a board can align in a very not just being articulated, but in a responsive way. There are some examples. there's opportunity in South Cobb to be, and it's very different now that it's incorporated, for South Cobb to be more than just the industrial center of the county. That may be the policy interest of the elected official. That has got to be parroted back on how policy and how economic development occurs. Also, when it comes to revitalizing other areas, even though we might have tools here that are in the county, if there is not a feedback mechanism with these other interests, we are operating in a vacuum and we do not leverage the strength of these other entities to make the transformation in the Canton Road area, in the Austell Road area, and these other areas. Help us provide a tool that strengthens the way that we all work together. So as one moves, the other one's helping to move. Because if we continue to move the way that we have been, we will continue to have imbalance in the county. And we're talking about this at the ARC, about how do we change the model of how we're developing as a region. Because if we just use the tools in the same way that we have, we will continue to have imbalance in the region and bottlenecks through certain parts, and then investments in certain parts of the region, because we never look to see how do we recalibrate this system to make sure that the region works for everyone. So as you go about this, I'm looking for your help in identifying different examples that can be used to ensure that the policy interests here do not operate in a vacuum, and that really are helping to drive the way that economic development can occur in a feedback model that allows us to be stronger partners. So that's one thing. As that model is created, I'm very concerned about accountability and agency when it comes to that. When I say accountability and agency, we have a lot of strength in our partners, but the only partner, again, accountable is the county. So if we were to follow where the chamber is or where economic development is with Select Cobb, they are membership-driven organizations responsible to members. Yep. Irrespective of the interest for the county, it is what it is. The only organization that has that push and that weight to be responsive to the whole is internally. So there's got to be a strong alignment. Right now, what I've seen is our economic development seems secondary, not aware, responsive, not knowing about things that are occurring, and it just, with the level of responsibility and accountability, there's just agency mismatch of who is doing and pushing the interest and who is accountable for that policy interest. I'm asking you to help us with that. I do not ever want to hear somebody to tell me that one of the main things that our economic development director is to do is to coordinate internally. To me, this is not what I would have perceived to be the strength of what would come out of her office. I'm looking for you to help Cobb County economic development be a strong partner, be a strong promulgator in ensuring that the way that this county develops from an economic development perspective is not done apart from the 5 people that are sitting here who are charged by the public with how the county is to develop and move forward. And I'm looking for options, I'm looking for best practices, and I'm looking for pros and cons so that we can help be a better leader, so our department is strengthened as they're still getting their sea legs, and that everything that you provide is not just looking at what is today, but it is to help her, is to help her department, and ultimately to help this county, to help our citizens so they don't feel like nothing comes to their community, that economic development opportunities just will not ever come this way. And they, just like the region, they've got to commute and go to the other part of the county to see return, just like people from the south side have to commute to the north side of Metro region to see something. Mm-hmm. Help us find a different model that works. That's just kind of what I'm expecting.
Okay.
So I appreciate a lot of the data. I haven't looked through all of it. I'm hoping that you will provide us a robust footing so that we can make sure that we have a strong economic development model for Cobb, not just looking at what's done today, but that's going to lead us over the next 5 or 10 years, that builds confidence within the department and within this organization and with all of our citizens. Okay. I don't know if does anybody else have any questions? Yes.
We do have a strong relationship with Select Cobb and the Chamber. They're sitting right in the back of the room. And I don't consider Sabrina to be getting her sea legs, or Robin, or even the newest hire. They're very experienced and have been doing this for many years and do have those relationships. So I don't know how a consultant is going to help with that as far as the plan. They can put a plan on paper, but the relationships are there, and with all of us, with the partners. Look at this list. Select Cobb's on here, Chamber, KSU, Small Business Development, the cities, CIDs.
I will
I disagree, Madam
I'll respond. I didn't say it wasn't strong. We wouldn't have gotten here if it wasn't. I believe it can be made stronger. And I don't speak in a vacuum. I speak from observation, I speak from communication, and I speak from being here on this board for a very long period of time. I speak from talking to other partners in the region. I speak to talking from other partners in our nation. And I know we can be stronger in aligning the policy interests that are here of our board through the activity with all of our partners, so that there is a strong feedback loop, so that we are all working together and that there is proper alignment of who has responsibility and accountability for outcomes.
One thing I want to add, going back to the beginning of the chairwoman's comments about, you talked about upskilling. So I know it's a big pivot, but upskilling, reskilling, is there a way to put some market insights into the report of untapped skills that we may have in Cobb that aren't being deployed? So I mean, you can shift people upward or
You know,
side.
the best pathways, right? So
Yeah.
you're identifying, yeah. And
Well,
I think it
and-
does go to economic mobility as well.
Well, so when you're attracting companies to relocate, or you're looking at those targets, you know, what are the talent pools that we have here that we're just not tapping into? Because there are a lot of people who may be working in a job that is not leveraging majority of the skills that they have, that they could be deploying if they had different options that were reachable. Back to transit, you know, it's not about the best employees you can get Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It's the best employees in the region that you want to make sure can get in. So is there a way to look at those insights to see what opportunities we have to place people in better mobility, upward mobility of a career, because they do have the skills, we just don't have the jobs where they can deploy them.
Yeah.
So that would be helpful. And last observation, just on this slide, I'm weird and I'm looking at stuff all the time. We've listed 6 of our 7 cities, but Austell is missing. I think that's an oversight, and we should correct that.
Certainly. Yeah. We apologize to
Commissioner
you and
Gamble.
Austell. We'll
Commissioner
correct it.
Gamble, I think you had a question.
I guess the biggest statement that has come out that bothers me is you stated, no one has the template that Cobb County needs. And to me, that's a powerful statement, because as a consultant, you are just using templates to try to put us into a box, where Cobb County has been known for decades to lead. We set the standards that everybody else now follows. So as far as how do we go forward with our economic development, it's bringing the partners back to the table and saying, okay, these are the resources we have. These are our limitations. How do we go forward? No offense to the consultant, but they're not the answer to our problems. We need to be working with the chamber, with Select Cobb. It is not the county's role to educate the workforce. That is the role of our schools, our colleges, our universities, and our trade schools. We need to be sitting down and becoming back to being the leaders, not following everybody else and following into their issues that they are experiencing in their communities. We need to be looking at what we have and what we can make great going forward with the limited resources we have left. Because Cobb County grew more in the past couple decades than most cities see in 30-some years. And yes, we have infrastructure woes because of it, but with what we have left, how do we go forward? And the people with those answers are sitting in the back of the room. They should be the ones up at the podium leading this discussion with us, with the rest of our partners.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, like I said, this is about partnership with everyone. And I'm hoping that as we move forward, that there are some paths forward for us to consider to strengthen it. There was a brief conversation around economic mobility, which is something that is, or upskilling for some. You know, I know from being a district commissioner in South Cobb, you had double-digit unemployment in the same census tract as the most industrial businesses that we have here in the county. What we didn't have was a transportation mechanism to get people safely across I-20. Low-hanging fruit, very little will. Also, you have people that may live in, again, I'm speaking from a district commissioner, that's what I was, that live in South Cobb, that commute to Atlanta to find more opportunities that could be placed in the job sector area that was in South Cobb, because every industrial business, any business community needs support of professional services. But there just was not, there's opportunity, very little will to see how you place those in areas that could perhaps keep people from commuting outside of the county. My observation is if we just continue to do the same thing that we see works, we are missing other opportunities to strengthen economic development throughout the county. I don't have all the answers. Everybody's doing the best that they can do with what they have. I'm asking you, I'm pleading with you, help us have a model that strengthens what we have so that we can continue to strengthen economic development throughout the county. And again, in a way where there's that accountable feedback loop. Are there any other comments or questions? All right, thank you, appreciate it. We'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back. Well, matter of fact, we'll break until 3 o'clock for our next presentation. right, welcome back to our work session this Tuesday, May 26, 2026. We are now at our second work session of the day, which is to receive a facilities conditions assessment and update regarding facilities management. We have our director here, Andrew Yakimovich, who will walk us through this presentation.
Thank you for letting me present this afternoon. I'll shorten it up a little bit because of time. Wanted to talk about facility condition assessments, and just the basic definition evaluates the physical condition of a building and its critical systems, HVAC, electrical, structure, and life safety. And then what's included in it, the main point is an inspection of all the facilities, identifying physical and functional deficiencies. And the biggest one, eliminate conditions that are either potentially damaging the property or present safety hazards, and then obviously developing cost estimates and schedules to correct the deficiencies. Atlas is the consultant we're using to do the facility condition assessments, and this just shows a report, high-level executive, easy for me to read to see where the priorities are and the costs. And then it goes on in depth as we go through it, shows us the information in different ways. This here is what facilities uses. It goes into specific details on costs and useful life of our equipment, and that's what I use to come up with the costs. And then it gives us a lot more detail for our project managers if we want to replace. This is for the elevators, knowing they need to be replaced in the next 5 years, talks about them and gives us information on that. And then obviously pictures. So the biggest thing is phase one we completed in 2024. I looked at 43 facilities, Marietta Square, courthouse facilities, some senior centers, libraries, 16 park facilities, and some other single buildings to get to 43. Then it shows immediate needs, things I need to look at real quick was 308,000, and then year 1 through 5, totaling just for the 5 years, a little over $10 million. And most of the systems were the HVAC systems, elevators, fire sprinklers, and generators. And then the top buildings, because of the square footage, was all the courthouse facilities. Biggest thing from this slide is look at the 10-year total, but look, comparing year 1 through 5 and year 6 through 10, all of our work needs to be done within the first 5 years. We have a lot of work we need to accomplish. And then I just wanted to, since it was all the courthouse facilities showing the next 5 that had the most costs, Austell Health Center and Probate Magistrate and Community Center. And then phase 2 I completed in 2025. The parking decks at the square here, police headquarters, super stations, DOT, and some others. The immediate costs, things we need to look at right away, was $47,000, and again, a 5-year total being $8.6 million, about the same systems that need to be replaced. And then the top 5 buildings, Powder Springs Station, Schweitzer Library, 911, police headquarters, and DOT administration. No surprises there. Again, looking at the costs from 10 years, 1 through 5 is when we need to get a lot of this work accomplished. So consolidating those, so 85 buildings, just for 85 buildings, that's not all the county buildings. Our immediate needs was 308,000, and then through year 6, what will get us to 2030 is a little over $20 million. Funding received in 2024 just to start the assessments was $1.2 million and a little over $500,000 for repairs. RAP 1 funds, I was able to receive $5.8 million, and then I'm requesting for the next RAP funds, RAP 2 funds, $5 million, and if 2028 SPLOST is voted on, $15 million there to take care of all the repairs we need. And then phase 3 will be this year, completing another 30-some buildings for that.
You went by this way. Andrew. Okay.
Building commissioning we're doing, and that is a process of inserting all our.
Andrew, can you go back to the money? Okay, give me 1 second. Can you just distill this for me? This is saying a lot. Overall cost of phase 1 and phase 2, these are all the costs. Over here, I'm looking at funds that you have in place. How are your funds matching? Are they not matching? They don't?
They're not matching.
Okay, so
So the plan is, With the RAP 2 funds and RAP 1, that's a little over $10 million, what we're gonna do, and then the $500,000. So I have $10 million to do $20 million worth of work, but we'll prioritize anything in there, get capital operating funds to do some additional work, but the next SPLOST and therefore we'll keep up with the repairs that are needed to be done, because when we get to 2030, it'll be time to redo the facility conditions assessments again.
Yes, it'll be time to do it again. So these numbers, after you go past year 6, will likely exceed the amount of revenue you will have, even through getting through SPLOST, RAP 1, RAP 2, and 2028 SPLOST. So then we'll have to look for another source of funding. Right now, we're providing about 12 million in capital maintenance funds for every annual budget. So
That's
help me
correct.
understand, so I'm looking at SPLOST RAP 1, SPLOST RAP 2. Are those numbers being considered in how we address this number here?
Yes.
Does that get folded into the operating? That's not operating capital, that's your operating capital. So where are those dollars reflected?
They're not reflected in these numbers right here.
Yes,
Because
okay.
the operating capital, I won't be getting any facility condition assessment funds.
Facility, so the amount that we get in 12 million, that doesn't go to this
Yeah, I
plan?
get a portion of the $12 million.
Okay. I'm just trying to see how we help better close the delta between this.
Well, I don't think the expectation is me to get $20 million to maintain every little thing coming from the reports. It's taking that information, taking the vendors we have, repairing our HVAC systems, taking my work order system, combining all that together and getting the priorities and handling those.
Okay.
Because it's a lot of money, and as we
It's a
go
lot
on.
of
So
money.
hopefully the next round of facility condition assessments that we do, there'll be a lower cost because we're taking care of the equipment now
Okay.
and maintaining them.
Okay. Fair enough, generally. Yes, go ahead, Eric. Commissioner.
So on the, no, that's fine. On the, just what you're assessing is just equipment within the facilities, not actual condition of the facilities?
Actual condition of the facilities
Okay,
based
it's
on the
condition as
equipment.
well.
Yes.
Are you also looking at things like ADA compliance, bringing a
Yes.
building to code? You're looking at the,
Yes,
okay,
sir.
so all those are included, okay. And was the detention center, county jail, part of this assessment as well? Because I know it's probably
It was talked about, but they were going to do that separate because Atlas doesn't handle detention centers. That's a specialized
okay,
assessment that needs to be done.
okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
So some of these, where you identify specific buildings, libraries, or courthouse, or whatever, do they have anything in their budget for maintenance and upkeep?
Only parks.
Only
So all the
park?
maintenance for the libraries and all of that is within my budget.
Within you, okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you get the 5 million for SPLOST and then 15 million's on the 28 SPLOST, if that passes,
Yes,
you should be at your 20 total.
that's
But
correct.
hopefully you won't need more. There's always going to be something that happens that has.
Correct, and hopefully with the 2028 SPLOST, there'll be RAP funds associated with that. And time go on, we'll be requesting that.
Right.
And if there's not enough operating capital, request.
But have the big ticket items like roof
Yes,
roof
ma'am.
replacement and stuff like that have already been identified on
Yes, ma'am.
everywhere?
Both
Okay.
from this condition study and also from the vendor, Garland, that we use for all our roofs. He gives us an outlook of the roofs we need to replace in the coming years.
Okay, thank you, Andrew.
I'm trying, All I know is we're going to have more money to be able to work through this list with both SPLOST. I can't reconcile Phase 1 and Phase 2 on the other slides to this, but you're showing us a path forward where we can at least begin to whittle away at this.
And I think,
$20
again,
million
first time
number.
we've done facility condition assessments, first time asking for the funds, yes.
Yeah.
It's not
Okay.
going to be a fast process, it'll be a slow process as we move forward and get a handle on that, and how we want to ask for funds and all of that.
Okay.
And Chairwoman, this was, you probably remember when Sharon Stanley was here and we
Yes.
started the, right, facility condition assessment, and we said we would take a look at, you know, our facilities so that we can begin to plan for how do we begin to put money aside for what we know is coming. This is the first time we've done it. So what I wanted Andrew to do is to bring you all up to speed on where we are and where we're going, but also understand that the 12 million that you all appropriate within the budget for capital, he only gets a fraction of that. That is for all of our capital requests. Yes, ma'am. All of the departments, to include the courts as well. That being said, what we'll do is we'll start looking at chipping away at these capital requests and what's being done. And so when we come back to you all will know in advance when something is probably going to fail. I mean, we can look at it and go, okay, we put a new air conditioner in X facility in 2025. The livelihood or the likelihood that it will, you know, will last about 20 years, so we can start planning well in advance for some of these things. And also, you know, you all know that Andrew will be leaving, and so we wanted to make sure that you all are aware of the fact that he is doing these things and put these things in place. So if you have any questions for him over the next couple of weeks, you can specifically ask him for data that we can get to you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I know it's a lot, but we're further ahead than where we have been
Yes.
before.
And again, I don't foresee the commission giving me all the money I need to repair everything. I just don't think that happens anywhere. I know it didn't happen with me at KSU, so it's taking the priorities of those and then having a plan. And I think the second go-around of the assessments will show where we made improvements with everything. We're also doing building commissioning, and that's the process, obviously, of taking a look at the MEP systems when we build a new building, and also major capital projects. We bring in a consultant. There's also enhanced commissioning where we look at all the systems, the roofs, windows, and all of that. So my plan is, as we do animal services, 911, South Cobb, we're going to do enhanced commissioning on the new building to making sure it's built correctly. There's also retro commissioning. That's going back to our older buildings and taking a look at that and see where we need to make improvements there. I'm doing that at juvenile court right now. There was a lot of complaints of being too hot, too cold, and it was in random areas. So we took a look at the wintertime, and they came in, looked at it, made some suggestions, and we implemented all of those. And then once it gets really hot out there, we're going to take another look at the building and fix that building for the courts. And then just a side note, since 2010, the state of Georgia required all state buildings to have this building commissioning done. So I brought that here to Cobb County to improve our buildings. And the way to do that is just quality assurance is just making sure we get what we're paying for. I've asked for a lot of money to build these buildings. We want to make sure all the systems operate correctly. The other one is risk mitigation, just making sure we find all the problems with the building before I move in the department. So before we start animal services, we know all the systems there are working correctly. And then the last one is making sure when the building's closed out, making sure I get the commissioning reports. All of my mechanics are getting trained and the people in there, making sure we're getting all the documentation and warranties. So the first building we did was the firing range. We did building commissioning on that, and we're also doing the sheriff's headquarters. So in the end, it's between that and then as we go to facility, we have a building that's operating correctly, energy efficient, everything's working great. And then as we go to the facility condition assessments, it'll delay some of that because we have a better quality building from the start. And then wanted to talk a little bit about the new, what's on the SPLOST is the new state court building. When it is passed, our plans with that and the future plans. So it'll be a 7-story building. To the right of that, while there is a parking deck for the judges, that area there will be available to build another building. in the future. So in 15 years, if we need another courthouse building, we need another administration building, whatever we need, there'll be space left there. We can put that parking lot underground and build on top of that, and then showing the walkways. So the plan on there is, when it is funded and get money for construction and design, that I'll also receive design funds. So the existing state court building, I'll be able to renovate that for probate and magistrate. So when the next SPLOST comes around in 2032, I think it'll be, we'll be able to obtain construction funds to renovate the existing state court building. And then the same thing is when probate magistrate moves out, is to renovate probate magistrate for whoever in that time, in 15 years will need that space. The Superior Court need more space because there's more judges, because our population's grown. That's what we'll look for. So we do have a plan for the whole space there. And again, just some renderings that y'all saw, and looks like Superior Court. Piper O'Brien was the same architect that did Superior Court. They did these renderings for me, and taking a look at that. And then one of the ideas I had with, while we're not adding employees in the new state court building, people may be parking other places. So the top of the employee parking deck, the Waddell deck, we talked about doing the solar panels on the roof there. One of the slides shows what was done at Georgia Power, the 3 bottom ones. Able to add a canopy of solar panels on top of the deck. And my energy analyst said that I'll be able to power up the deck 100%. So there won't be any need for the power company. We'll be able to generate the power ourselves. And then we'll have a 20% capacity where I can bring power over to here, so we would have emergency power here. So if there was a power outage, like the gentleman before me kept saying, if we lost power, the lights on here would stay on, the elevators would work, card security would work, and all that. So we're anticipating $100,000 a year savings from the electrical bills, and we're seeing about a 5-year payback once we get it built. So we're in the process of selecting a design firm to help us with that.
Great.
And then saving here, just biggest thing is saving 643,000 kilowatt hours per year. Again, the deck will be purely solar. So you have the electrical car chargers there. Those will actually be solar powered. So that'll be a cool thing. That's what people want with electric vehicles, be able to go from solar power. And the last thing I just wanted to talk about was our utilities. We have 1,500 active utility meters. So we get 1,500 bills a month from electricity, gas, and water. My budget for that is around $3.6 million. And then it shows the primary providers for that. We have a software called Energy Cap, and my plan is we're implementing right now is bill capture, because I have 1,500 bills. I really can't do anything with that information. It's just too many bills to put in any type of into the software. I can't do that, so we're going to hire Energy Cap to do that for us. They'll be able to put it in a dashboard, and they're going to look at the bills for us, going to see if we're paying taxes where we shouldn't be, are we being double billed? If somebody's personal property somehow got into us paying the bills. They anticipate saving $360,000 a year on that the first year alone. The software is around $56,000, and they anticipate us saving between $40,000 and $50,000 for years after that. So I think that's a great thing. Help us all out saving money in an easy way. And just going back, I forgot the 1,500 bills. 900 of them are from Cobb EMC, so we're one of their biggest customers. And of those 900, a small percentage is all the traffic signals and the street lights. So we pay for all of that, so that's where a lot of the bills are generated from. So with that, I know I went quick, just trying to speed things up, but if y'all have any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. It's helpful to see the full array of opportunities within facilities, management. See if commissioners have any questions. Yes, Commissioner Burrow.
Are the solar panels or any construction for the parking part of the new courthouse on the SPLOST?
No, ma'am, it'll be a separate project.
Okay, but where is it coming from? Where's the money coming from to do the solar panels?
My understanding, there's parking revenue, and then also some RAP2 funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you
All
for
right, thank
sharing this with us. I know, again, back in the Hankerson days, we were just trying to identify what buildings did we have, what buildings did we not have, what were we leasing, what were we not leasing, and now we have a strategic way of understanding what we have and how we can better take care of what we have. So I appreciate the update and hopefully look forward to learning more about how this is being implemented so we can be better stewards of how we're taking care of our buildings.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you for your presentation.
All right, thank y'all.
And thank you for serving. So how soon is this retirement?
June 12th.
That is like in 2 weeks? Thank you, Andrew. We appreciate your service, and thank you for stepping up to lead the department and leave us in much better hands.
Thank y'all for your
Yeah.
support of facilities management.
Thank you. Take care. We will be adjourning shortly. Just want to invite everyone to come back at our 7 o'clock meeting where we have our regular Board of Commissioners meeting. Thank you and have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you then.